Hello, Evgenia. Thank you so much for being here and for saying yes to being a guest in my interview series, I Am, a series that gives you the opportunity to know different unique people, all in the comfort of your home, and to have a glimpse into their universe. And I invite you, if something is very useful, is very unique, is very appreciated by you in this conversation, I invite you to click the link and to donate an amount of money for helping the hospitals in Romania which are challenged now. So I am very glad to have you here in this Zoom room, and I challenge you to let us know in 30 seconds, very shortly, who you are.
Thank you so much for this invitation. I was really happy to receive it, especially in this really beautiful, exciting and transformative time. Now, my name is Evgenia. I'm an artist and I'm a poet, and I work across various mediums. I work with poetry, visual poetry, calligraphy, sound, performance, installation work. So I also create artist books, and right now I'm here in my studio in Portugal, in Ericeira. The weather is fantastic. We are heading towards summer, and everything is opening and blossoming, and I'm very excited about it because I work a lot with ecology. So ecology is really important subject in my art, but also with cycles of nature. So I'm always looking how nature is changing, how cycles are changing and inspiring us and giving us clues to how we could, keep shifting our life and being more aligned with nature. And I think right now is really beautiful time to actually align with Mother Earth, with nature, with forest and more, because we have an opportunity to be more still, more calm, more listening, and hopefully hearing.
Thank you. What does nature means to you?
It's such a good question. It's a very big question, I think. So I think I feel that nature means to me, first of all and foremost, connecting to my inner nature. So to be really connected to myself, to my inner core every day as much as I can, to be able to tune myself into that inner space. And of course, then to connect that inner space to the space outside of, my body and kind of my perceived limits. And then to look out and to really feel how nature is with its small and larger cycles, how it's inspiring me. So nature for me is inspiration, I believe. For me, it's breath of life. Going into nature every time for me means grounding, inspiring and respiring, and letting this breathing follow to become more calm. So it's always a teacher, like the inner teacher that connects, the outer teacher that connects to my inner teacher. But it's also a teacher this kind of teacher that always shows you different dimensions and always inspires you. And when you are ready, it opens these portals that you did not see before, and there's like magic there and beauty, and it's never ending. It's really, really, the depths of nature for me is never ending, just by merely going out and seeing, every day a small bit of the forest that I'm able to walk to. Right now, every day, I discover things, and it is showing me every time like a different angle, a different corner. It's never the same. It never repeats itself. Even we kind of sometimes look at it with our fixed gaze. It's always different. So for me, nature is also this fluidity, this change that's constantly inviting us to, to embrace the change and say, okay, yeah, it's changing and it's fine.
Did you had this sort of relationship with nature for all your life, or was it a moment when you discovered it?
I think I had this relationship all my life. I was lucky enough that I grew up in a place in Ukraine where there was plenty of nature, where we played every day as kids. Basically, I was spending pretty much from breakfast until dinner with short break for lunch, all the time outside. During summers with my grandparents, but also just with my friends. So always playing in the grass and under the trees, always interacting with different plants, always knowing what the plants are and really knowing what to do with them, and which ones are good and are dangerous and are medicinal. And until recently, I wasn't aware that I actually had the knowledge of that, because now I keep discovering that kids, when they go out, they're like, oh, but they don't know this plant. So now they start learning, because there's awareness that, schools are, oh, maybe we can introduce this teaching about the plants and the names and so on. But I basically had that, and I grew up with that knowledge without knowing, without acknowledging that I have it. And that was absorbed from my grandparents and from the environment, from the family and the society, actually. But about 3 years ago, I discovered quite a different awareness about this link with nature, because we moved from London to Portugal, to area of Lisbon. We are living in a beautiful place in nature, but I saw the level of devastation in Europe and the level of degradation of natural ecosystems, which I wasn't really aware about before. I mean, I knew there are problems, there is deforestation, there are things happening all over the world and also in Europe. But what I saw here in Portugal made me acutely aware that actually there is this huge kind of abyss, gaps in when ecosystem is not functioning anymore properly. And that was this very strong impression that I've had since 3 years. And this is pretty much what I'm kind of open to now. This is what I'm working with.
So your ecologic project, what does it have as a purpose?
So the project that I started about 3 years ago, called Eternal Forest, at the beginning it was an exploratory artistic study about basically human psyche, like why is it that we are destroying the ecosystem? And I tried to understand where are the roots of the mentality that's doing it, why people are doing what they're doing, but also what is the intrinsic human relationship with nature, something that is there, that's not broken, that's not, that is still present, and that we can perhaps rediscover and bring up and bring to the light. And that's where I started. So I worked a lot with communities here in Portugal and interviewed people, and I made a film and showed it around the country and beyond. But then I arrived to the point that I wanted to do something more hands-on and physical and actually engage these communities, because I felt like people actually want to shift that attitude and shift that perspective, but not necessarily already know how. So I started the project, which right now has this formula, which I will say. So I would like to create 1,000 eternal forest sanctuaries for humans and for biodiversity to be protected for 1,000 years. And that will be created through art and through community engagement. And this is what I'm working on at the moment. So the project is quite large in terms of number of these places, but also in terms of time scale. And so I'm working with the idea of shifting the perspective of time, our perception of time, from the short-term thinking towards the long-term. How can we create art that can last 1,000 years, and how can we also create art with forests. So how can we collaborate with forest ecosystem and with our human community to create something that is for the community, that is artistic, and that can last for, you know, generations to come.
So, what pieces of art, as examples, have you gathered in the project till now? What sort?
So right, what kind of things? What basically? What are the outcomes? So there is a film which was created in 2018, and the film is online. And actually, we could even share the film after if people like to see. The film is a series of interviews with people, and it's really beautiful because it's people from the communities that talk about their relationship with forests, and it's very visceral, it's very live because it's people speak from the heart. Then I made a series of visual works, and I work a lot with paper and ink, with principle of calligraphy. So I imagine the traditional principles of calligraphy and traditional materials, but I create contemporary works of art. So I'm always writing poetry inspired by either what people tell me by those conversations, or by what forest tells me, but by what the forest wants to communicate to the people and to me. And then I write in different languages. I write in Russian, in English, in Portuguese, and I also translate myself. So saying that is, I love the language, the human language, but I also love the language of the forest, and I kind of try to combine them. And so then this poetry inspires visual works that then they happen to be on paper in the form of visual artworks, artist books. So there are some of this in this series, which again we can share. But one of the things that I really feel kind of special about in this project is last year, as I was creating the vision for Eternal Forest Sanctuary, what came to me is Eternal Forest Manifesto. And I imagine Eternal Forest a bit like a movement, hopefully in the future, which, you know, people can just get involved into. So manifesto is this thing that it's a poetic manifesto that you take and you recite, and you can sing it or you can recite it in your own language. And my vision that manifesto will be translated in any language where Eternal Forest Sanctuary can emerge. So imagine it can be actually translated in Romanian if we created an Eternal Forest Sanctuary in Romania. And I actually know there are beautiful, dear people, friends in Romania who are protecting Romanian forests, and they have a special project for that there. So this artwork is like a multi-purpose. It is in a form of a scroll. It is in the form of poetry, in the form of video, but also it can be read by the whole community. So it can be done as an oral tradition performance where the whole community gets together and we read it, and maybe we even chant it together. So part of my vision this year, I don't know how we can do it online with the digital tools, because the idea was that this summer we will create a workshop where we would create a song based on this manifesto, so that everybody can get involved and everybody can bring the bit of the melody in to, you know, to make this poetry alive. Mm-hmm. So these are pretty much the artworks, but the main artwork which yet is to come is the actual physical place that's designed through art, through landscape design, maybe people who understand forest ecosystems and biodiversity, people who can bring this knowledge together. And then imagine the whole community gets involved and say, well, what if we created this little path here, and we would want to, you know, to come and meditate here and to do our ceremony here. So it's like an idea of how can we create a community, beautiful kind of sacred forests that will stay there and it will be for them. But we kind of invite artists to participate in this and bring something artistic into that approach.
It sounds beautiful and big and vibrant. I love your project. How do you see art as a way of implying people, of creating a movement? How can art transform and change people's mind and feelings?
Yeah, it's big question, and it's so I think we all know by now that art has immense power to move people. So, on emotional, spiritual level. On mental level, art can be incredibly conceptual and challenging, and you really have to think and you have to, analyze and understand. So there are many layers. Then the art can be also very visceral and physical. And for me, if I distance myself a little bit from my own project, but if I look at it from the perspective, I have a feeling it has potential to do all of these things. So it makes people think, okay, but how can we imagine this 100 years and 200 and 500? But what does it actually mean for my life, for how I interact with other human beings, for how we build infrastructures and how we create projects and how do we create communities? How do we, because once you shift that perspective, everything shifts. Physically we get involved because nature is very physical. We go there and we can actually bring all of ourselves. We have to walk the land physically to really understand it. And then there is, of course, this emotional and spiritual element where I think art can really elevate people. It can give them hope. I never thought that I will pronounce this word. Some years ago, I was like really beyond the idea, art needs to give hope to people. But now I have a feeling that it's actually important, and I think we have this kind of responsibility to sometimes to like draw the road, draw the road map, and say, listen, actually what we thought was impossible, maybe it's possible. And we don't quite know how we're going to get there as humanity, as a human society, but there is something there. And once you put it on the map, I think it really expands our idea of things that we can do that are becoming suddenly possible. So you bring them from the box of impossible to the realm of possible. And then there is this hope and inspiration. I think we don't even have to always understand art. Like, for example, I have a couple of friends who read poetry and they're like, we like how it sounds, but we don't quite understand, poetry. There are some people who maybe love listening to a piece of music, but they don't understand the whole nitty-gritty and how everything works and composition. Like, we don't always have to break it down and analyze. But I think as long as art can really inspire and show us a different possibility and different kind of dimension and give us ways of thinking differently from different angles and perspective, I think it can contribute a lot. And then it pushes us artists to also start thinking differently and kind of put ourselves out of this box of, I'm just an artist producing, square things for gallery space and selling them, to doing something different, working with communities, working in collaborations with other artists, but also with people who are outside of the art world.
So when you started this project, you had a process in mind, or they came one after the other like a domino? You invested yourself in this community work. You had some fears you depressed. How was it?
Yeah. So as an artist, I have my own process of how I like to work. So the way it worked in this particular project, I basically applied for 2 art residencies in 2 consecutive years. And I was very lucky because both art residencies were very interested in the work that I proposed. So they were like really grabbing this opportunity by bringing me in. But also, first residency was actually based right in the epicenter of all the forest fires and monocultures here in Portugal. So I was in the right space, physical space, and also My art residency actually took place 6 months after the big fires in 2018. So the fires happened in 2017, 6 months earlier. And the second art residency was taking place also in an area where it was such richness of things to research about, human community and ecosystem and so on. So some things I plan so that I have like a structured time I can immerse myself into. This time is better than being at home sometimes, because then I can really cut myself off normal life and just really, really dedicate myself kind of 24 hours and go and also meet people actively, because once you're in that place, it becomes really site specific and you really become temporarily immersed into into people's life, also into the natural spot, for example, into the forest and so on. But then in between, nothing is planned. So in between, things are really flowing, and I just make myself available and allow things to happen to me and allow things to come to me. And I'm kind of every day I'm learning to, open my ears and eyes and really listen, because a lot of things come from encounters that are not planned, or people who just send me a message and I always say, okay, let's have a conversation, So a lot of things come from people. I'm a big believer that, especially if you're working with people, then people will always communicate you their need, and then you can take this need as a wave and kind of ride this wave and use it for inspiration. People will always tell you a story, and then you grab this story, and maybe it's like it's the thread in a bigger story, but then it's woven. And this is what happens with my
your story and his story.
Yeah, exactly.
And you then intersection, common ground.
Absolutely, yeah. So a lot of this process is very organic and intuitive, and I like it.
Yeah, it shows. How did you find your passion for art? How did you choose that for yourself?
I don't think there was a choice. I don't think I mean, my personal story is I was writing poetry from when I was 14. I started writing poetry on the day when my grandfather died. So I guess I had some kind of interesting, I believe it was like a transmission. It was like an impulse that happened, was probably emotional and, everything together. And then I kept writing poetry. And then I realized that I'm actually a very visual person. So along with the language, I need to explore visual realm and what it means. And so I did a lot of photography in the kind of first years of my artistic practice. I started with photography and film, more video, and I was doing photography until the moment I realized that kind of a photo on the wall is just not fulfilling for me. So I decided to explore other mediums. And it was, it's always a process. And I actually, I'm one of these people, one of these artists that changes a lot the medium and changes a lot the approach. Sometimes I envy artists that can pick up one thing and do it all their life, and every year they do it better and better. I have to choose, and I have to let some things go, and then some things stay because they're important and they work for me. And so gradually kind of I find my style and path and kind of the main thing that I want to do. Yeah.
And right now you think that multisensoriality in art is a way, or how do you combine visual and words and sound, or do you take them separately in the project? How do you work with all that?
So it always combines. I never know how it is going to combine. So the basic principle I use is I write poetry and then it becomes visual artworks. So for example, if it's a poem, then I usually choose the main line, and then maybe this line will stay the whole line, or maybe I choose just one or two words, and then this can become an artwork. And then there is always connection between poem and artwork. The Eternal Forest Manifesto is a long scroll, is a 22-meter scroll, which has all the poetry in it. So it's not, it's not just one or two words. It's a whole poem, which is, I believe if I read it, it's about 10 minutes. So it's quite long piece of work. But then I usually perform my work. So there's always the sound aspect in it. And there are moments also, I have some performances when I also sing. So I chant my work and I kind of make performances with elements of sound poetry. So there is always things going back and forth, and sometimes sound inspires a poem. Because in fact, in many languages, well, I work a lot with Russian, of course, and in Russian language, the way I write, it's all about sounds. There are some poems that it's just sounds. Sounds are really important, and it's combined from sounds, and then the meaning kind of shines through. Maybe it's a bit hidden behind the words that I'm making really bright sounds or really harsh sounds. So yeah, I always experiment, but it's not on purpose. It just happens. It's very intuitive.
So do you think that a poem in Russian, for me, that I don't understand Russian, would transmit the feeling?
Yes, I truly believe it, and we actually did try it. So I did one particular performance. I was in London. I did a collaboration for a while called Atanata. So we were performing, I was performing a series of my poems, and there was one poem in Russian, and I was kind of performing it as a sound poetry and singing it. And it is all about silence, qualities of silence. And of course, I performed it in the way that I took kind of audience through all the sensations that silence can be, all the different qualities of silence. So I tried to create this impression of, silence can be like this, but also like this, and it's all captured inside one poem. But also when you start performing the language, it becomes already like an abstract song, like a melody or a rhythm. So then the language is not so important. So you use it as a basis, but then you transcend it, and then it becomes more abstract. It's the same for me with calligraphy. At the beginning, it's concrete. I can write it. It's concrete. Somebody can read it. But if I actually use more expressionist style, then of course it completely breaks apart, and it becomes a drawing. It reminds you of something like grasses or roots or splashes, and then but then there are actual words behind it. So there's always the borderline between the two.
It's like getting to see the meaning of words, or focusing so close that you are not able to read the meaning, but only see something blurry and which takes another form. Very interesting. I would be very curious and excited to hear you. Could you give me a glimpse into something like your performance?
Of course. Okay, I don't know if I can do like a proper big performance, but let's see. What I'm doing right now, I'm recording once in a while videos in the forest of the poems that I've written for Eternal Forest for my last artist book. And maybe I will read something in Yes, I will read this one. So I'll read you in Russian, and then I will read you in English. It's a very short poem, so it won't take too long. Не ведать языка леса, не видеть невиданного, видимый вне времени, во времени скрыто, видение вещего леса. And in English, unknowing the language of forest, unseeing, unseen, seeing beyond time, concealed in time, the wisdom of dreaming forest. So that was like a mini performance. Actually, I'm thinking now that you asked me this question, you know, sometimes the sonic part comes very quickly. Like the poem just wants to be a sound poem, more or less. But what I found with these poems, I'm actually starting to make artworks for them in May. So I have this challenge that I put on for myself. But now that you ask me, I would like to create more like a performative aspect of the same poem. So watch out on YouTube.
I'll be on your traces. It's beautiful. Thank you. It connected me to that forest in sort of ancestral way. It has a breed of incantation for me. I could say it's depthful. So thank you. I would like to know how do you find your inspiration when you start to write? Do you have a ritual? Do you have a certain moment? Do you have a feeling that conducts you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't write every day because it's just impossible. So right now, the Eternal Forest Project is requiring so much of me connecting with people and kind of getting things organized that right now, basically, I'm not in the zone of writing. So the writing, for me, it comes in this very special moments. It just happens, like first poem happens, and then it opens like a flood. And so I have to stay with it, and I have to just be present and then kind of writing it on paper. But I have one very simple ritual, and it really works for me because I already started working with calligraphy some time ago. I basically take my ink and my paper. I use Japanese ink and I use brushes. So here I have some brushes I can show you. Just one.
Wow.
Nice brush. But I also have something like this, which is actually a present from a beautiful calligrapher. She's an artist and she is in Japan. I took a couple of classes from her. And so she gave me this brush and she said, go and do some experiments. It was wonderful. So what I usually do is I just take one of these papers and I take a brush and I just stand there ready and kind of in this, just get in the moment. And then I just be silent and wait, and sometimes not necessarily even with music. Sometimes silence is just so beautiful. We're here in the countryside, birds are chirping. I'm sure you can hear that. Mm-hmm. And the wind and the change of weather. So I just stand and then it comes. And then it's one word or maybe it's one phrase. And of course the phrase already has everything in it that needs to happen. It has this rhythm that is encapsulated inside of it. And sometimes it stays for a long time, like a phrase on this piece of paper. And sometimes it just all comes out and then I leave it and then I go take another one. And I do this exercise in the mornings, just take a few papers and just like write several poems, whatever comes, and sometimes in all the languages mixed together. Sometimes I don't find the word, I use another language and then replace it. So, and it's very, very, once it starts going, it's very fast. And then I just put them aside and come back to them at some point, yeah.
Do you have moments when the inspiration hit you in such a quickly way that you are not able to transcribe?
Yeah, I grab my phone and I put it on the recording and I just go for it. Yeah, usually when I walk or when I'm going somewhere with car, or even like, yeah, sometimes just doing like ordinary things, like going to the bank or standing somewhere in the queue and observing things around, or coming out of the supermarket. And sometimes you just need to do this because it's that special word, a combination of words, like, whoa, it's really good. Okay, let's put it down. So, and then sometimes I don't find the recording until a few months later.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, for being open, and for letting us inside your world. And as a final line to our interview, I ask you to complete with one word the sentence, me, Evgenia, I am.
Ooh. I am human.
Thank you so much for your warm humanity shared with us in such a beautiful way.
Thank you so much for this beautiful opportunity to share. And yeah, I hope it inspires people who watch and inspires to do beautiful things in life and to share as well.
Please give us a link of the
Absolutely.
project in Romania when it starts.
Yeah, I can share this project. Yeah, and of course, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too.